Mark Rogers TV with our final top 25 college football teams for 2012 following Alabama's blowout of Notre Dame in the BCS championship game of 42-14. This is how we did the rankings. First of all, we looked at record. So at least initially, we gave the nod to an 11-2 team over a 10-3 team, but our analysis didn't stop there, of course. We then went to head-to-head matchup if that applied. So for example, Baylor and Oklahoma State both went 8-5. But the Bears beat the Cowboys head-to-head on the field 41-34, so Baylor makes our top 25, Oklahoma State does not. But sometimes in trying to go head-to-head, things become a bit convoluted because multiple teams play head-to-head, especially in the SEC, where you've got Florida beat South Carolina beat Georgia, Georgia beat Florida. Then you throw LSU into the mix. LSU beat South Carolina, but Florida beat LSU. And then tack on Texas A&M, which lost to both LSU and Florida. But Texas A&M, of course, is the only team in the country to defeat the national champion, Alabama Crimson Tide. So then you've got to look at overall resume. And this is where a squad like the Florida Gators come through. Despite a crushing loss to Louisville in the Sugar Bowl where the Gators really got stomped, the Gators went 11-2, and they are the only team in the country to defeat 4 top 10 teams. If you look down at the description section on your YouTube post, you will see our top 25 teams. We will go through the top 10. Starting with the Florida State Seminoles at number 10. The Seminoles went 11-2. They lost to North Carolina State and Florida. They beat Clemson. That turned out to be a really good win. And the Noles did themselves no favors in a matchup with Northern Illinois, winning and doing what they had to do, 31-10. But it wasn't the type matchup that they needed to gain some respect and move up the rankings. At number 9, we've got Texas A&M at 11-2. Of course, the Aggies' spotlight was Johnny Manziel and also defeating Alabama in Tuscaloosa. A&M lost early season matchups to LSU and Florida, but they looked really impressive in the Cotton Bowl in defeating Oklahoma 41-13. At number 8, we've got Stanford at 12-2. They lost a controversial game at Notre Dame in overtime. They lost to Washington. That was a bad loss, but they beat Oregon. They beat UCLA twice. They beat Oregon State. Stanford comes out at 12-2, winners of the Rose Bowl at number 8. At number 7, surprise, surprise, Notre Dame, 12-1. Yes, we credit Notre Dame, of course, for winning all its regular season games. But value of play, performance has to key into this. If Pitt makes a field goal, Notre Dame loses. It takes the Irish down to the final play, winning with a field goal against a 6-7 Purdue team at home. They needed a controversial call at the goal line to defeat Stanford in overtime. Let's see, Notre Dame defeated BYU 17-14. If Michigan just runs the football and doesn't let Denard Robinson throw it, Michigan outgains Notre Dame and they win that game at Notre Dame. So I think the Irish showed us in the championship game against Alabama how good they are or not so good. Yes, they're a top 7 team, and that's where we've got them placed at number 7 at 12-1 because we've got teams above them that played in the same conference as Alabama against like opponents and did much, much better. Speaking of which, we've got South Carolina at number 6. They won the Outback Bowl over Michigan 11-2. South Carolina down Georgia 35-7. That was mighty impressive. Florida's at number 5. We talked about the Gators' resume defeating Florida State. They beat LSU. They also downed South Carolina as well, and Florida beat Texas A&M as well. Georgia's number 4. They're 12-2. They beat Nebraska in the Capital One Bowl. That's coming off an SEC championship game. Of course, the infamous play down to the 4-yard line on the tipped pass. So Georgia 4 yards away or maybe 1 second away from playing in the national championship game against Notre Dame, so Georgia comes in at number 4. Ohio State's a difficult one. Of course, the Buckeyes are undefeated, which that's our first criteria is record, and we think Ohio State's an exceptional football team. Unfortunately for the Buckeyes, they were ineligible, which would not hurt them in our rankings, except that kept them from a Big Ten championship game, so there's a tough opponent that they would have had to play in Nebraska, and then on to a Rose Bowl or a BCS championship game, so the Buckeyes played just 12 games versus 14 for the other conference championship teams. So you got to keep them below. Oregon at number 2. The Ducks Lone loss, of course, to a fine Stanford team in losing in overtime. So the Ducks go 12-1. And then, of course, we've got Alabama, the best team in the country, at 12-1. They lost to the Aggies of Texas A&M. No shame in that, 29-24. And Alabama crushed Notre Dame in the BCS championship game after defeating a fine Georgia team in the SEC title game. Those are our rankings. We would love to hear from you. Give us your top 5, your top 10, your top 25, whatever you'd like to see. And of course, the description box will lay out our top 25 teams for 2012. Tell us where we got it right, where we missed it, right here on Mark Rogers TV.